Howdy my totally tubular gamers, we're back with another video. I got a fun one for you. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 best RPGs of the 2020s so far. It's kind of hard to believe, but it really is 2025 and we are halfway through the 2020s, and there's been some pretty kick-ass RPGs that have released. So today I thought I would celebrate them, hype them up, gas them up, let you know which ones are absolutely worth playing. I'm not saying these are all 10 out of 10 must-play games, but in my humble opinion, these really are the 10 best new RPGs that have released in the 2020s. This list is in no particular order and I'm not including any remakes here. While there have been plenty of amazing RPG remakes that have come out in the 2020s like the Super Mario RPG remake or Persona 3 Reload, I'm really focusing on new RPG experiences. I'm making kind of an exception for one game, but you'll understand when I eventually get to it. Now, as always, I am but just one man. I have not played every single RPG released in the 2020s, so if you think there's a game I'm missing or something I should have included, let me know down below. There's a good chance I haven't played it yet. Either way, I'm always lurking down below. Let's get a discussion going. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. It really is just me producing all of these videos, and I can promise you the money's going to a good place and not a mobile app addiction. But enough of all that, let's get to the games. So kicking things off, we have Cyberpunk 2077. I feel like this game really has had its own storied history throughout the 2020s. When it initially released in 2020, it was a broken, shitty game that clearly had a lot of potential but was just rushed out the door for some reason. However, throughout the 2020s, the game was getting updates, patches, even a large DLC. And here we are in 2025, and I can confidently say that it is one of the best RPGs of the 2020s. While it obviously initially was not, it is absolutely a fantastic game now that really lives up to The Witcher 3 and CD Projekt Red's reputation. While I still personally prefer Witcher 3 just a little bit more, I can't deny Cyberpunk's quality, not at all. This is just a great game by pretty much every margin. Taking place in Night City in 2077, it features one of the most realized cyberpunk worlds you'll ever find in a video game. And it sees you playing as V, a merc who really goes through some serious shit, and of course Johnny Silverhand shows up. And that's all I'm gonna say for the story. The story, plot, characters, world, and especially world building of Cyberpunk 2077 is nothing short of fantastic. Even when the game released in its broken, unfinished mess, everybody was still praising the story, the world, and the characters of this game because it really is fantastic. There are so many memorable characters. A lot of the characters are really fleshed out with a lot of dialogue and moments. Like, it's really great stuff. Almost as great as Pan Am's lower half, but when it comes to the actual gameplay, yeah, it is absolutely fixed here. It is a action RPG that plays like a first-person shooter, but there are still plenty of RPG elements such as how you want to build your character. There's been a lot of tweaks over the years on the RPG side of things, but I think they've absolutely nailed the RPG aspects at this point. It is set in a giant open world with tons of quests to do, things to see, places to explore. You get to drive around in vehicles. The vehicles control much better than they did at launch. And I think this game has easily one of the best open worlds of the 2020s. There's just a lot of detail to this open world. It feels very lived in. There's a lot of detail in general with this game. It is a great looking game. The soundtrack's excellent. The voice acting is on point. The presentation, it's really good. I feel like this game is just kind of everything you'd be looking for in a role-playing game in the modern day. It's got a really immersive world with realized characters. There's a lot of role-playing elements such as your build and the choices you make. There's a good amount of replayability thanks to these choices. The gameplay is refined and polished. There's a lot of content and there's a fantastic DLC to play as well. This game, it's just got a lot going for it. And while I'm always going to be upset with how this game launched, they really turned this one around. We're talking like full 180 to the point where, yeah, I think it's a great game. So here we have Pokemon Legends Arceus. I know it might surprise you a little to have a Pokemon game on a list like this, but hear me out. Pokemon games, especially modern Pokemon games, have plenty of issues. And when I first started playing Legends Arceus, I thought this game was just okay at best, but after playing all the way through it and looking back on it, I really think this was actually a great game and arguably like the best Pokemon game ever. I'm not even over exaggerating out here. I thoroughly enjoyed this game and I hope that this is the formula going forward for pretty much every Pokemon game. I know there was Scarlet and Violet, which did take a few things from Legends, but that game also had its fair share of issues and I think Legends Arceus is a much better game overall. So why exactly is this game on the list? I'm so glad you asked, let me tell you. So this game has a really interesting premise that sees your character actually getting sent back in time to early Japanese colonization. And during this period, the world is still learning about Pokemon, and so you get tasked with essentially creating the world's first Pokedex. And I gotta say, I think that's actually a pretty cool setup. I think it's way cooler than just getting all the gym badges, and while the story and characters aren't anything to write home about, it was decent enough. What really hooked me in Pokemon Legends was really the gameplay, specifically the aspect of catching the Pokemon. That's always been kind of the hook of Pokemon, is gotta catch them all, but this game actually moves the formula forward, and you can catch Pokemon by just throwing Pokeballs at them. You sneak up on them in stealth, and you can catch them like that, and you don't even have to fight them. I think that's really cool. I had a lot of fun catching Pokemon in this game, but when it comes to the actual battle mechanics, they also made some improvements here. Not only is the game much faster with its battles, but they actually added a bit more depth here with special variants for attacks, and the Pokemon just feel more individualized than ever before. I think the combat, it's pretty decent in this game. There's even a few real-time elements to it, like during the boss fights. They really actually tried to move the Pokemon formula forward. I really liked exploring the maps and really just trying to catch as many Pokemon as I possibly could. It was a lot of fun. The game's presentation is actually decent as well. I know Pokemon games really struggle with graphics, especially at this point, but this game has a nice little art style, and it actually ran okay. It didn't run like total dog crap. Like most of the games I'm talking about today, this game has a good amount of content. While the main story will only take you around the 20-hour mark, if you want to try to get most of the Pokemon, you're going to be here for quite a while. And I think you're going to want to get most of the Pokemon since the game has a very good sense of exploration. It was just a lot of fun, and I feel like this is what I've wanted from a Pokemon game forever. So yes, I am very excited for the new Pokemon Legends, and we'll see if it's as good as this one. But if you haven't tried it yet and you even kinda like Pokemon, or maybe liked it as a kid, this is one I think that is worth checking out. So here we have a game that I've discussed many times, and that game is Elden Ring. You know Elden Ring, I know Elden Ring, we could probably just move on, but I'll briefly talk about it. Elden Ring is not only one of the best RPGs of the 2020s, but arguably the best game of the 2020s. I think when people look back at what games define the 2020s, Elden Ring is absolutely going to be one of the top games. And it really is no surprise at all, especially if you've put a decent amount of time into it. Like, it's just an absolutely wonderful game in just about every single aspect. You're dropped into this just massive open world and given the freedom to do pretty much whatever the hell you want. The game has an amazing sense of exploration that very few games can match. This game rewards you for going off the beaten path so much. You're constantly being rewarded with stuff. It all feels incredibly handcrafted. Like, it really is an amazing open world, but when it comes to the RPG aspects, it's no slouch either. There are so many different builds and weapons you can have for Elden Ring. You could play through this game several times and you'd have completely different builds with different weapons, and it would all be really great. When it comes to the combat, it's some of the best combat From Software has ever made. I don't think it's like Sekiro good, but it is really great, and it is a step up from Dark Souls. It feels great. There's tons of weapons. They're all really different from each other. There's actually a good amount of depth and variety. There's a lot of tough enemies, and then the bosses are just incredible in Elden Ring. This game has some of the best boss fights of any video game, and there's so many also. Most games have like maybe 10 boss fights. Elden Ring has like 60, 70 plus. There is so many amazing boss fights in this game. Some of them are really challenging. This is a challenging game that can be brutally punishing at times, but man, when you finally overcome those challenges, it feels so good. The game has loads, and I mean loads of content. You could spend easily over 100 hours in Elden Ring, and then it's absolutely worth replaying as well. And if that's not enough, there's a massive DLC to play for it as well. Very few games are as complete as Elden Ring. It really is just one of those 10 out of 10 must-play experiences for anybody. Even if you don't really like this style of game or you don't like Souls-likes, I still urge everybody to try this one. There's just not many games that are as good as Elden Ring, straight up. But here we have another game that is absolutely fantastic, and that is Metaphor ReFantazio. I've been talking about this one a bunch as of late since it did release just a few months ago. But I can tell you it's easily one of the best RPGs to have released in the 2020s. It is a very fascinating, interesting world that very well might be rooted in fantasy, and you know, there's plenty of fantasy elements, but there's a lot of real world topics in this game as well, and I just think that the game actually does a really great job handling all of that. I think the story is fantastic in Metaphor. There are some really great moments. All of the characters are good in this game. Legit, every single character is good in this game. The dialogue's great. There's plenty of amazing moments and interactions that probably aren't going to be leaving my head anytime soon. Like, it's just all really great stuff. And the world building, chef's kiss. It's really great out here. I don't want to spoil anything for the story, so I'm going to just talk about what you see on screen, which is the fantastic art style. Like, I love how this game looks. It just goes off the chain when it comes to the presentation. It is so beautiful, from all of the character models to the menus. Like, this game, it just looks wild. I love it. I love the soundtrack also. At first, I was a little turned off by it. I was like, man, this is really different. This is kind of weird, but the more I played of it, I was like, hell yeah, bring on the monks chanting and shit. This is a bop. This shit slaps. I actually really like the music now. When it comes to the gameplay, it's a little bit of a mix of Persona and SMT, but it also does its own thing. When it comes to the game's overall structure, it is very much like Persona, where it has a calendar system and goes from day to day, and you get to plan what you're going to do, and you need something completed by a deadline. Usually you got to complete a dungeon. I will say there are a lot more dungeons in Metaphor than Persona or SMT, and I think they're actually pretty well designed for the most part. They're all handcrafted, which is good, and yeah, I enjoyed a lot of them. When it comes to the combat, it's a mix of real-time and turn-based. I'd say like 90-95% of it is turn-based, though. When the action stuff shows up, I think it's pretty cool. I actually like that, but when it comes to the turn-based combat, I actually very much enjoy it. There's quite a bit of depth with this combat, way more than you might initially think. You might just go, oh, it's probably just like Persona or SMT. There's a bit more to it than that, especially the more you play the game. This is one of those games that I think starts out good and just gets better and better the more you play it. It's a dark, sometimes depressing game, but when it's good, oh, this shit is really good. Easily one of the best stories of any game in the 2020s. While the gameplay is pretty good and the RPG elements I think are also very good, it's this game's story, world building, and characters that are really going to last with me, and I have no problem recommending this game, especially if you like turn-based RPGs. So from a game I can't stop yapping about to a game I haven't yapped enough about, here we have Hylics 2, the only indie game on the list. But I assure you, this being an indie game does not affect the game's quality. It is a great RPG and maybe the weirdest game on this entire list. I mean, just look at it. The first thing you'll probably notice is the crazy art style. It's a mix of like stop motion, claymation, and simply put, it's just bizarre. There's really not another game that looks anything like this. Not even the first Hylics looks anything like this. Speaking of, this is Hylics 2. It is actually a sequel to the first game, but you don't need to have played the first game at all. The story is all over the place in this game, making very little sense, but it sees you playing as this creature person thing known as Wayne, the yellow guy, as he's trying to stop this evil king, and that's all I'm really going to say. The story, it is absolutely bonkers in this game. Same goes for the gameplay. While there's a few different gameplay styles, for the most part it sees you exploring around these environments and getting into fights. The fights are turn-based and are probably most comparable to like the SMT franchise. What's really cool is that there's actually a good amount of depth and strategy to this game. Every single enemy has some kind of major weakness, and it's up to you to try to find out what that weakness is, so then you can overpower the enemies. And the moves you get in this game not only look really cool, but they're just pretty out there. Everything really is out there. It's as strange as it gets, but I actually do enjoy the combat to this game. When you're not in combat, there's some decent exploration, there's some puzzle solving, and a few other gameplay styles show up here as well. Like at one point it's a platformer, at one point it moves into first person like a more traditional old school RPG, and the game's got a ton of variety is what I'm trying to say. I enjoy it, and I really enjoy the music. The music to this game is like absolutely god tier fantastic. I always have it in my videos for a reason. I love the music to this game. I really enjoy this game. This is unironically one of my favorite RPGs of like the last 10 years. It's a total hidden gem. Not enough people have played it. Not enough people talk about it. Here I am hyping it up. This one, it's really great. So here we have another game that I just love yapping on and on and on about. Here we have Baldur's Taint 3. I could talk about this game forever and ever. It really is, just unironically, no hyperbole, no over-exaggeration, one of the greatest video games I have ever played. I've played a lot of games, a lot of RPGs also, but none of them hit like how Baldur's Gate 3 did. This game just absolutely blew me away. And it's not like it blew me away in just one aspect either, like, oh, the graphics are really good, the combat's really great, or the story's really well written. No, it really was like every single aspect that blew me away. It was all just really great stuff. The game just has an incredible story that I don't want to spoil at all. I'll just say it involves mind flayers, and that really is it. The world building is nothing short of spectacular, but what really makes Baldur's Gate 3 more than the world building, more than the story, is the characters. This game just has some of the most likable, entertaining, interesting characters of any RPG. Your party is amazing in this game. It really is a legendary cast of characters, but it goes well beyond that. There are so many great characters in this game that aren't in your party. Like, there's not a bad character here. When it comes to actually, playing Baldur's Gate 3, I think it's really great also. It is a turn-based RPG in the style of D&D, which does very much rely on dice rolls, but you come to get very used to it incredibly quickly, and I actually really like the turn-based combat in this game. I like how much strategy you can have. There's a lot of creative problem solving you can do. All of the characters are vastly different from each other. You can build them really however you want. You can build your character however you want. There's just a lot of customization here, as much as there would be in real life D&D. How you build your character and their background, it really means a lot in this game. It will change up interactions, dialogue options, combat, etc., etc. This is one of the most replayable video games of all time. There are so many different ways to go about basically every scenario, and by the time you get to Act 3, things can be drastically different. But what's really crazy is just how high quality everything is. The pacing is fantastic. The way everything progresses is great. I actually really love Act 3. I know some people didn't, but Act 1 is fantastic. Act 2 is pretty good. And then Act 3, oh, it's so good also. I pretty much wanted to cry when I finished the game because I was so sad that it was over. It really was just one of those experiences that I didn't want to end. I was thoroughly enjoying every single aspect of it. I played the entire game co-op, don't regret it. I've gone back and played it since, and man, it's just such a good game. One of the best RPGs of all time, easy. When people are talking about the best games of the 2020s overall, you bet your ass Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be near the top of that list. So here we have an RPG I'm sure people are a little sick of hearing about, but we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy XVI also released in the 2020s, but in my opinion, Rebirth is quite a bit better than both of those games. This is just a fantastic game and one of the best Final Fantasy games of all time. It's kind of incredible that this game even exists. Like, I love the original Final Fantasy VII to death, but I also know just how ambitious it was for the time. So the act of essentially remaking a large portion of the game and also adding a bunch of content was no easy feat, but not only did they do that, but they did a great job at it as well. The game does continue the story of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which did veer off in a few key areas from the original, and I will just say that Cloud and his friends go on this really big epic journey in the story. Oh, it is so good in this game. The storytelling is nothing short of phenomenal. Like, it is so great in this game. Not only are like all of the characters likable, including dumbass Chadley, but they all have clear motivation, they're well written, they have a good amount of depth, especially your party members. I really enjoy the party members of this game. They're just all so great, and the way the story continues and how everything goes, oh, it's really great stuff. It kept me on the edge of my seat. Yes, the game absolutely does take its time with not just the story, but really the entire game, but I was eating all this shit up, and when it comes to the gameplay, same thing pretty much. It continues the gameplay of the remake, but now it's in these big open worlds, and yeah, I really like it. I know not everybody loves the gameplay or slower pace of the remake and Rebirth, but I really was picking up what this game was putting down. I love the combat, I love the mix of action, but there is a little bit of strategy and you still do mess with the menus. It feels really nice. All of the characters are like crazy different from each other, and they're all incredibly fun. It is so much fun in the combat, no matter who you are. Even the new characters are really great also. Then there's so many different enemies, there's tons of boss fights, tons of great set pieces. You know I love my set pieces. There's lots of memorable moments, and then there's just an ass load of content. There's like over 100 hours worth of content in this game, easy, if you do even some of the side stuff, and I think it's all pretty great stuff. This is some of the best side content of like any video game, but there really is a lot of it. The game looks fantastic, it plays excellently, the music is great, the story's engaging, the party members are great. This really is one of those must-play RPGs in my opinion. I think even the most lapsed Final Fantasy fans, the people who are just sick of this franchise, are going to like this game. Or they'll hate how much the game wastes your time and how slow it goes, but I think it's worth trying at the very least. It's just a wonderful game. So here we have an RPG that I feel like just doesn't get talked enough about, and that is Nioh 2. Now, Nioh 2 came out in 2020, like right when the pandemic hit, and while I know there is a very dedicated, passionate fan base to this game, I feel like in the mainstream eyes, yeah, it's not talked anywhere near enough about. A lot of people just wrote it off as like a Dark Souls clone, but if you've ever played Nioh 2 and you've played Dark Souls, you'll immediately see that there are tons upon tons of differences, and this is easily one of the best action RPGs of the 2020s. Sure, it does have some similarities to Dark Souls. When you die, you have to go get what is essentially your souls back, but there is so much more to this game than that. The combat in this game goes crazy. It is nothing at all like Dark Souls. It's actually more in line with Team Ninja's other games like Ninja Gaiden. It's actually really great. Not only is it fast and frantic, but there's a lot of depth to it as well. There's tons of different weapons, there's different stances, there's elements, there's projectiles, there's a bunch of special moves. There's a lot of shit when it comes to the combat, and then depending on what kind of enemy you're fighting or if it's a boss, even more depth shows up here. The combat alone could pretty much get it on this list. It really actually is that great, but how you build your character, you know, the role-playing aspect, is also really great. You can have some very different builds in this game, and I also think that's pretty cool. Something about Nioh 2 that's very different from Dark Souls and Elden Ring is that it's level-based. You go from level to level. There's no big open world or interconnected areas or anything like that. The level design in this game, it's fine. It gets the job done. It's nothing spectacular. There's plenty of little shortcuts, but it's more than serviceable enough. It really is just a means to get you from one awesome set piece and fight to the next. This game has some fantastic boss fights, and it really gets challenging. This is maybe the hardest game on the list, but I also found it very satisfying. I really just enjoyed my time with Nioh 2. There's a lot of content. It'll take you well over 40 or 50 hours to beat, and I think most people are going to really enjoy it. Even if you're not a big fan of Souls-likes, I think this one is still worth checking out. I know plenty of people that have actually replayed this game several times because there's just so much depth with the combat. While it's not perfect, the presentation can be a little iffy and the loot system is just kind of trash, I really enjoy Nioh 2, even to this day. Team Ninja have put out a few other action RPGs like Rise of the Ronin, Wolong, and Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, but none of them have topped Nioh 2 in my opinion. That really is like the best that they've ever had. You know, outside of my beloved Ninja Gaiden, which may or may not be coming back soon enough. Either way, Nioh 2, oh, such a good one. So squeezing its way onto this list, we have Shin Megami Tensei 5, specifically the re-release that came out last year, so SMT5 Vengeance, VV. Now, I love Persona. I've actually ranked the entire series. I've played all of the games, but the main SMT series, I actually haven't played much of it all. This is really the only one that I've ever put a decent amount of time into, but I actually think this game is pretty great also. I wouldn't say it's Persona 5 or Metaphor good, but I still think this is a very good RPG, and if you're a fan of either of those games, I think you'll immediately like this one. Yeah, it has plenty of similarities to Atlus's other RPGs. It is a turn-based RPG where you fight with demons, and those demons may or may not look a little familiar from another series, but there's a lot more going on here than you might expect. When it comes to the story, it is very different from a certain other series. It actually takes place during what is essentially the apocalypse, and yeah, that's all I'm really gonna say here. I'm not gonna say the story, characters, world building, or any of that is as good as, say, Persona, or, you know, Metaphor, but I think it's pretty good nonetheless. But outside of that, the gameplay is really where this game shines. The combat is really great. It is just straight SMT combat. If you've ever played any game that has anything to do with SMT, you'll immediately understand how the combat works in this game. And it's great. There's a lot of depth, there's strategy, the battles are really quick, there's actually a good amount of variety. Recruiting the demons is pretty funny, how you have to talk to them. Sometimes they can be fucking assholes and be super annoying, but for the most part, it's pretty entertaining stuff. Exploring the overworld is also pretty cool as you're just surfing around on the sand dunes, but there is actually some pretty good dungeons in here as well. I really enjoy the gameplay of SMT5. It's maybe the best aspect of the entire game. The gameplay kind of knocks it out of the park when it comes to a turn-based RPG. The presentation's nice, the music is excellent. Hot damn, the music is good in this game. And what's even better, the game's not only on the Switch. While I have put a decent amount of time into it on the Switch, man, the PC version, the PS4 version, the Xbox version, it is much better. It runs smoother, there's way more content, they fleshed out the story quite a bit more, there's more demons, like hot damn. This is a good game, and if you're somebody who likes JRPGs, well, this is a really great one to play. Alright, so we're wrapping things up here, but you knew I couldn't forget about maybe my favorite series at this point in time, the Yakuza Like a Dragon series. Aw yeah, I love this series to death. I've been talking about it for a long ass time, and This is one series that in my opinion really just keeps getting better and better. While the older games had some RPG elements, they were still brawlers at heart. But in 2020 with Yakuza 7, also known as Like a Dragon, they changed to a turn-based JRPG style, and man oh man did I love this shit. And then last year there was Infinite Wealth, and well, if you've seen my top 60 games of the year, you'll know how much I like this game. I love both of these games, and well, to be completely honest, I'm breaking my own rules. It's my damn list. I'm including both of these games. I think Yakuza Like a Dragon and then Infinite Wealth are very much worth playing. These are some of the best JRPGs ever in my opinion. The Yakuza series has so many great things about it, and it absolutely works as a turn-based JRPG. Of the two games, I would say that Infinite Wealth is slightly better, but that does not discount Yakuza 7 at all. That game is also really good. Both of them star Ichiban, a new protagonist, and man, he really is like the most likable protagonist of any JRPG. He's just such a great character. There's a lot of depth, but there's more than just him. He gets a bunch of friends. Kiryu shows up as well. Kiryu's excellent. And these two games just have some of the best dialogue and writing you'll find in any RPG. While I think the story is slightly better in Yakuza 7 over Infinite Wealth, that doesn't discount Infinite Wealth's story at all. I also think it's really great. I really loved Ichiban's origin story and where everything goes. But it doesn't really matter which game you play, you're going to have a great time. The gameplay, oh, it's excellent. You get to roam around the map like the other Yakuza games. It's just when you get into battle, yeah, it's a turn-based battle system. And I actually think the turn-based battles are pretty good in this game. The combat is solid. While it's good in Yakuza 7, in Infinite Wealth, it really comes into its own and it's something special. Both of these games bring all the weird, wacky, crazy, bizarre shit from, the rest of the game into the battle system, and it just works. There's actually jobs. You can build out your characters differently. Everybody, actually plays a role here. You actually have to interact with the battle system as well. There's timing similar to, say, the Paper Mario games, so you're constantly engaged. There's tons upon tons of enemies and bosses. There's actually a good amount of depth here. While there's not as much as, say, SMT or maybe even Persona, and it's not as quick as, like, Dragon Quest, I really like it. And while I know that there are plenty of people that are sad that they're not brawlers or beat 'em ups anymore, all I gotta say is you got plenty of games to play, and going forward it looks like RGG isn't abandoning that style of game. It's just for the main series, yeah, it's turn-based, and I think the battles are awesome. When it comes to everything else, oh, it's great. There's so many amazing sub-stories. There's a lot of side content in both of these games, and it's all really good shit. Some of the best side content of like any video game. Plenty of games have useless, boring side content. Not these two games. Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth, all the side content, we could be here all day talking about the side content, just how good it is in both of these games. Both of these games look great. The soundtrack is just goated. Man, the fucking soundtrack, the soundtrack just goes so hard in both of these games. I genuinely really love these games. I'm just kind of fanboying about both of them, it sounds like at this point, but they're some of my favorite games of the last decade. They're both RPGs, and I cannot recommend them enough. If you haven't tried any of the Yakuza games before, you can start with Like a Dragon. It's a great starting point, but don't go into Infinite Wealth without playing that prior one. I think, though, you're really going to enjoy these, and you're going to put a lot of time into them. If you want to beat both of these games, you're looking at over 100 hours, like 120 if you want to do some of the side content. Oh, man, just so excellent. And with that, that is it for today's video. What are some of your favorite games of the 2020s? What are your favorite RPGs? What would you like to see me do in the future? Do you like these 2020s, best of 2020s videos? Should I do some more? This is the first one, but should I do some more? If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment our code word. Our code word today is going to be bricks. Yes, it is a classic. Haven't talked about bricks in a while, but bricks are really important. They're kind of a foundational element to our society as a whole. I think I'm going to stop talking now. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. I'll see you all soon.